Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought that I would do this little video that I found very particularly interesting. And when it comes down to it all in all, the reason why I thought that I would do this little video is because not only do I think that it's about the right time to do this video, but there was a couple of people in my comment section overall who either recently subscribed to my channel or have been subscribed or been around for a bit. And I do certainly thank all the most recent commentators and subscribers and people who like the videos or tune into the videos. Certainly greatly appreciated. But anyways, when it comes down to it, the reason why I specifically wanted to talk about this is not only because there is a possibility of this super fight happening this year, or at least alleged super fight based off of star power, but on top of that, I thought that I would also give my little breakdown of who I think would win the fight, at least at the current moment in time. And the fight that, of course, I am talking about is the Ryan Garcia versus Gervonta Tank Davis fight. And I do think that in terms of star power and even in terms of skill v skill, I think that it is a very intriguing matchup. Now, in my view, I think that Ryan Garcia should probably take one or two more fights before he takes on Gervonta Tank Davis. And some people would disagree, but even though Ryan Garcia, I think, is very talented, especially physically, and he has shown me, in some sort of way that he is very decently skilled. I just think that Gervonta Tank Davis is a little bit too experienced for Mr. Ryan Garcia right now, but maybe certain people overall would disagree. Anyways, I'm going to talk about that in this video, and I'm going to talk about my view overall and what I believe would happen in the fight or what both fighters would have to do in order to beat one another. But anyways, Mr. Boxing Eagle is going to talk about it. We all know who he's going to be rooting for in that potential fight, which is no problem. It is what it is. But he also got in a little interview, I believe, with Mr. Adrian Broner. And Adrian Broner, who, of course, is very good friends with Gervonta Tank Davis, I believe anyway, the last time that I checked. He gave his personal opinion on the fight overall, and let's get into it.
Like Tank versus Ryan Garcia.
Honestly, I don't think Ryan should ever get in with Tank.
For real?
Yeah,
I think he got some talent, man.
yeah. I actually, the crazy thing is, I got a lot of love for Ryan. Ryan called me.
Yeah.
I talked to Ryan.
Okay.
Like you gotta understand. I really got relationships with all these fighters. Like when Ryan was going through that shit, he called me, and we talked. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If Ryan Garcia loses to Gervonta Tank Davis, he's gonna text Adrian Broner, "How was it like after your first ass whooping?" There's overall no other fighter on this planet that can describe overall how to take an ass whooping better than Mr. Adrian Broner, or not a lot of other fighters. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I ain't gonna talk about what we talk about and shit, but
Yeah.
but I fuck with Ryan heavy, but I just feel like he don't need to go nowhere near Tank at this point of his career. You know what I mean? I know it's a big fight for boxing,
Yeah.
but I just don't think he need to go near Tank right now.
You don't think the speed and the length is enough to give him trouble?
Listen, bro. Don't go mess with the dude.
Yeah.
Leave little dude alone right now.
Yeah.
A score to settle. Canelo.
Oh man, AB, Algebra Books, African Babies. Adrian, the problem Broner, tells Ryan Garcia to leave Gervonta Tank Davis the F alone.
Well, let me state this overall before Boxing Ego truly goes into it. And do I somewhat agree with Mr. Adrian Broner, or do I disagree? I somewhat get what he's saying. Now, of course, there's a certain amount of people, and Adrian Broner is not the only either former professional boxer or professional boxer or boxer in general or analyst that believes that Ryan Garcia is not ready for Mr. Gervonta Tank Davis. For those of you, of course, that do not know, or maybe some of you probably heard this, Mr. Julio Cesar Chavez Sr., who, of course, is one of the all-time greats, he ended up saying that he does not believe that Ryan Garcia would beat Gervonta Tank Davis. At least that's what I heard. That's what I've seen overall, I believe, in certain interviews. And do I agree with those guys? Listen, what I'll state is this. In my view, for Ryan Garcia to really have a 50-50 shot, or maybe overall be favored against Gervonta Tank Davis, I think he really needs to get into a fight to where it is truly looked at as a 50-50 fight. Because sometimes when a fighter is put into the ring against an extraordinarily gifted fighter, or a fighter that is extraordinarily talented, even though that fighter is very, very talented themselves. If they've never really truly been in that sort of dog war, if they've never really been prepared overall to push themselves to certain lengths to where they've never been before, they may not know overall what level or to what extent to push certain objectives or to push overall certain strategies or to do certain things in that big fight. We've seen it with Fernando Vargas against Felix Tito Trinidad. We've seen it overall, probably with Adrian Broner against Marcos Maidana. We've seen it overall with a few other fighters, probably in boxing history. Unfortunately, overall, sometimes that can ruin a career. So we'll see all in all what ends up happening. But Mr. Ryan Garcia, in my view, right now, would I want to see him against Gervonta Tank Davis's next fight? Personally, no, I wouldn't. Because I don't think that Ryan Garcia, in my view, is a finished product. And if I'm Oscar De La Hoya, I'm trying to maybe get Teofimo Lopez in the ring, or maybe I'm trying to get Isaac Pitbull Cruz, maybe a Jojo Diaz. Maybe I would build him up with a Jojo Diaz or an Isaac Pitbull Cruz, and then you get him in the ring, maybe with a Teofimo Lopez or someone like that, someone that you truly believe, maybe is not going to defeat Ryan Garcia, or at least 100%, but you really overall start throwing him out to the wolves and you start saying, okay, let's see what you can truly do. But of course, Oscar De La Hoya, who knows, he may not be willing to risk that, because Ryan Garcia, when it comes down to it, and Gervonta Tank Davis, that is going to be a very, very big payday. But we'll see what happens. In my view, Oscar De La Hoya, just as well as Floyd Mayweather Jr. with Gervonta Tank Davis, both of those guys have been a little bit protected. Now, could it be overall because they truly are trying to get that Hollywood type of matchup? And when I say Hollywood matchup, I'm talking about very, very, very big in terms of money-like value and pay-per-view value with Ryan Garcia and Gervonta Tank Davis. It's very possible. But overall, it's going to be very interesting to see, what ends up happening with that fight. In my view, Ryan Garcia, at least if I were in his corner, I would want him maybe to fight a couple more fights, and especially face a fighter that you think all in all might be a real test for him. Now, he is stepping up in, competition gradually, but Javier Fortuna, in my view, and those other guys, Luke Campbell, those guys are not going to prepare you for the talent of a Gervonta Tank Davis, because Ryan Garcia, with the physical gifts that he has, and also with some of the skills, he could potentially beat Gervonta Tank Davis, but he is going to overall have to get used to, or he is going to have to get in a fight that is going to prepare him for that battle, because Gervonta Tank Davis is no joke when he is at his best. Gervonta Tank Davis, yes, he might be slightly smaller, or, somewhat smaller than Ryan Garcia. He may even weigh less than Ryan Garcia. He certainly does not have the reach advantage or the height advantage over Ryan Garcia. But Ryan Garcia, in my view, is not a finished product. If you put Ryan Garcia in there against Gervonta Tank Davis right now, you're putting overall in a completely baked cake against a cake that is probably 75% cooked. So overall, in my view, I don't think that the fight is best right now, but we'll see what happens.
That's what I want to talk about in this video. Stay tuned. What up, Fight World? It's your boy Ego, and I'm back with some more boxing. Make sure you SLC, subscribe, like, and comment. Really, in that order. Subscribe, like, and comment. On the road to 300,000. This is how I grow the brand organically with you great people. If you love boxing, you're learning boxing, you have something to add, you got some value from the things that I put out, then make sure you guys subscribe, like, and comment. Now, AB, at the end of the day, Adrian the Problem Broner, he did an interview with Cigar Talk. I will put the link in the description. And this is what he said. Quote, I don't think Ryan Garcia should ever get in the ring with Tank. Yeah, the crazy thing is, I got love for you, Ryan. Ryan, call me. I'll talk to Ryan. You got to understand, I really got relations with all these fighters. When Ryan Garcia was going through all that ish, he called me. I'm not going to talk about what we talked about. And then he goes on, Broner.
In all seriousness, when we talk about mental issues, Adrian Broner is one of the boxers or one of the athletes that I see that has a very, very big mental issue and a very big mental problem. And I'm glad overall to see that he is doing better overall with himself. To be honest, Adrian Broner does not come across to me as a very bad guy. He just comes across to me as maybe someone that maybe grew up in the wrong neighborhood. And some people are maybe not going to agree with what I say here. Maybe not completely raised right. It just is what it is. You can tell in a lot of the manners that he acts, he's just way too bashful when it comes down to it, especially for the results that he usually produces when it comes down to it. Just is what it is. And we may see that with certain fighters from those type of areas, like a Cincinnati or a Brooklyn or someone overall of that sorts in Atlanta, places like that. Just is what it is. But at the end of the day, Adrian Broner has had a lot of mental issues. Even at one point in time where I believe he was talking about potentially killing himself, kind of like Mr. Teofimo Lopez, who also has certain mental issues, just like Mr. Adrian Broner, and is also dealing with some of the losses and some of the damage overall in his career that may be irreversible. So we'll see what happens.
I was on to say,
So hopefully Adrian Broner can be a help to some of these boxers that maybe are suffering losses. And that's why Adrian Broner, it seems that he has more of an empathetic approach overall to some of these boxers that maybe he believes need some help. And I do appreciate that. That is great. Because to be quite honest with you, just a few years ago, if you guys remember, it honestly looked like Adrian Broner was going to end up dead in the streets somewhere. So good for him when it comes down to it. Looks like he's finding a good path, still continuing boxing. Do I think that he's ever going to be an A-grade fighter? No, but at the end of the day, it just is what it is. He is a multiple-time weight division champion. And on top of that, there's just always other stuff that you can do.
just feel like he doesn't need to go nowhere near Tank at this point of his career. I know it's a big fight for boxing, but I just don't think you need to go in with Tank right now. Listen, bro, don't go messing with this dude, Tank Davis. Leave the dude alone right now. And that's what Broner had to say, end quote. Now, my thing is this. It must be very, very tough for Ryan Garcia. He has somewhat of a following, like especially on Instagram or whatnot. Some people that
He doesn't just have somewhat of a following, Mr. Boxing Ego. He has a great following. And these guys will try to tear down that following because they want to make it seem like overall the fighters that they follow and subscribe to are the ones all in all that always have the biggest following, even if that is not the case. And don't get me wrong, both Ryan Garcia and Gervonta Tank Davis, they both have great star power. Everyone, even if you're a casual fan of boxing, you know who those two are. So that's what overall makes that fight very, very big. But in my view, for the fight to have the max amount of value, for it really, really to be a 50-50 fight, I think that Ryan Garcia is going to have to get in some real A-grade fights. That's not Javier Fortuna. That's not really even, Isaac Pitbull Cruz, because he's not an A-grade fighter. Ryan Garcia needs to get in the ring with someone that is truly going to test him. I would love to see Ryan Garcia versus Teofimo Lopez. And the way that Teofimo Lopez was able to look in his last fight, I'm not sure if Ryan Garcia would beat that version of Teo. But that'd be a great fight.
probably back him and think he'll do good versus the Tank fight. But when it comes to your peers, because just imagine, it's like, let's say an actor. I would imagine, I'm not saying everything's about winning awards and stuff like that, but when the Academy sees Leonardo DiCaprio in The Revenant and likes the portrayal, likes the character, and nominates him for an Oscar, that has to be a good feeling because you're a thespian, right? And they're...
Well, I understand where you're coming from, Mr. Ego, but at the end of the day, we do have to be very careful because a lot of the times, especially people behind the media or overall in Hollywood or a certain amount of other things, they can be bought off when it comes down to it. In my view, Mr. Ego and Mr. Dante, I'm not going to say that they're bought off necessarily, but they already have narratives in their mind that they already know what they want to play out.
Looking at your work.
And most people that commentate, especially in sports, really anything in general, they have a narrative at play, so you always have to be somewhat resonant enough, or you have to be, clear-headed enough overall to know what their machinations or what their true intentions are. And that's a big part of the reason of what I do on my channel. Anyway.
As an artist, as an actor, as a thespian, and they're saying, hey, you, Jack Nicholson, and Brad Pitt, Denzel Washington, yeah, I think you get the point now, Blake. Huh? Right? They're looking at you and saying, hey, this role is worthy of recognition. And then if you actually win the Oscar, that's even better. So being judged by your peers could be important. You know what I mean? Like, just imagine, like...
I would somewhat agree with that, but when we talk about also in terms of athleticism or when we talk about in terms of sports, you always have to have that rich confidence in yourself, even when the world does not believe in you. That's how Muhammad Ali got to be as great as what he was. That's how Tyson Fury ended up being as great as what he was. And I'm also, I'm probably going to do another video about Tyson Fury and the Muhammad Ali conversation, because that is the main reason why these channels, including Mr. Ego here, Mr. Boxing Ego, why he loves to shit on Tyson Fury so much, because they know the future comparison of what people are going to compare Mr. Tyson Fury to. And if he ends up beating Mr. Usyk and Anthony Joshua and he retires undefeated, they know that he's going to be a big threat for debatably being the greatest heavyweight of all time. Now, whether you agree with that or not, that's up to you, but they know that the arguments are coming.
Like there's some people that don't listen to Eminem, but his peers, aka other rappers, they're all giving him props. I've heard Rakim, 50 Cent, Nas, Jay-Z, Dr. Dre, producers, Snoop, everybody give him props. The Game, so he's being judged by his peers and they saying he's lyrically dope. So it don't really matter. So when somebody's in the same industry as you, I think that lends a little bit more credence. And when it comes to Ryan Garcia, almost every big name from boxing, past or present,
Well, I would somewhat agree with you to a degree, Mr. Eagle, but what I will say is this: we do have to be very careful overall of just always counting in other people's opinions. But I understand all in all, or at least what I will say is this: we cannot get brainwashed or overall just go purely off of what others say. We do have to form opinions of our own. But I certainly understand what he is stating. Basically, what Mr. Boxing Ego is stating here is that people overall within the craft of boxing, whether they're currently or formerly involved when it comes down to it, are, future, going to be involved, in the future, maybe amateur boxers have also commentated. Most people, including Mexican American fighters, are claiming that they believe that Gervonta Tank Davis is going to win the fight. And I have no problem with that. Now, what I did find interesting is that when it came to certain boxers, Black American boxers or black boxers like Lennox Lewis and Andre Ward, who were claiming that Fury was going to beat Deontay Wilder in the other two fights, they were claiming that they were quote-unquote Uncle Toms or company mans and all this other shit. At least some of them were. So I don't have a problem with what you're stating, Mr. Eagle, but let's also hold the same standards. Because when Mr. Shakur Stevens had said something nice about Tyson Fury, these dudes went off. Now, of course, what Mr. Shakur Stevenson stated was that he believes that Tyson Fury would beat Muhammad Ali in a one-on-one boxing match. And, in my view, it never was that big of a deal. Most people can't handle statements like that. It's like overall, if you watch NBA basketball, and if you try to tell people that Stephen Curry was greater, actually not even just greater, way greater than what Allen Iverson was. If you overall, are a little bit older than me, I'm 24 years old, and if you try to tell someone that's around 30, maybe 27 years old, anywhere in that age range, they'll argue with you all the living long damn day. They say, oh, you're crazy. Allen Iverson, he had the goods. He just never had any help. Even though they completely ignore the fact that Mr. Allen Iverson shot below 40% from the field, I believe, on 3 or 4 separate occasions in his career. Okay, even for that defensive era, that was terrible. So if we take a look at the facts, yes, Mr. Stephen Curry is not only greater than Allen Iverson, he's probably a few levels above him. It just is what it is. Excuse me. At least in terms of impact and accomplishments. Now, would I put Tyson Fury above Muhammad Ali? No, I wouldn't. But is it completely overall illogical to say that Tyson Fury, who's an undefeated heavyweight, won every fight and every big fight in his career, someone who is 6'9", 270 to 300 pounds with an 85-inch reach, very purely skilled when it comes down to it, and very intelligent, very offensively and defensively responsible and gifted? Is that really overall illogical in my view to say that a man like that would beat Muhammad Ali or possibly any heavyweight in a boxing match throughout the heavyweights history? I don't think that that's completely illogical. No, I don't. It just is what it is. Fury has his skill set, and on top of that, he has the athleticism and the size on his side.
That are publicly doing interviews talking about Gervonta Davis, they're saying more or less what Broner is saying. Stay away from him, or it's not going to end good. Look at Julio Cesar Chavez, legend in the game, legend out of Mexico, and just a boxing legend in general. The Golden Boy before Oscar De La Hoya was the Golden Boy. He said straight up.
Well, Julio and Oscar De La Hoya, in my view, they weren't really that similar. I've already stated this about Oscar De La Hoya in my view, and I also did this is another logical statement in my view, at least from my perspective, that many people get on my ass for when I say that Canelo Alvarez is already greater than Oscar De La Hoya. And people are saying, oh, you're bugging, what are you talking about? he beats Pinell, Sweet Pea Whitaker, and Chavez. Well, yeah, he beat those guys, but Oscar De La Hoya was really naturally bigger than them, and by a decent amount. What Oscar De La Hoya truly was a welterweight to 154 pounder who drained himself a little bit in the early part of his career. And even then, sometimes he could not even win some of the bigger fights in his career, like against a Sugar Shane Mosley or a Felix Tito Trinidad. Now, that was when he was in the welterweight division. But Oscar De La Hoya, when you really take a look at his career, and don't get me wrong, he was a phenomenal fighter. But don't sit here and tell me that, in my view at least, that he's greater or better than Canelo. In my view, he's not greater or better. Canelo Alvarez is a 4-weight division champion. And when you talk about overall winning the majority of the big fights in his career, he's won the majority of the big fights in his career, whether they've been bigger or the same size or smaller than him. Oscar De La Hoya, if he did not have somewhat of overall a size advantage over you, and if you were a true A-grade fighter, he was going to have a lot of problems with you. And if you don't believe me, take a look at the Felix Tito Trinidad fight. Although a lot of people find that controversial, take a look at the Sugar Shane Mosley fight the first time around. Take a look at the Floyd Mayweather Jr. fight, and take a look at a couple of other fights in his career. Oscar was a great fighter. But yes, in my view, he has been slightly overrated throughout his career. Just is what it is.
I'm not watching the Fortuna fight. I didn't watch it. I don't watch BS. I don't watch ooze, right? And then he goes on to say in this interview that it'll end bad for Ryan Garcia should he fight against Tank Davis. Now, here's another common denominator to this recent Cigar Talk interview with Adrian Broner. If you guys listen to that interview with Chavez Sr., Julio Cesar Chavez said, I think the night of the fight, Ryan Garcia had called him and wanted advice or whatever. He called him for whatever reason. And he says, basically, Ryan Garcia, and I'm just paraphrasing, he basically said, Ryan Garcia is a good kid, and he called me, and
दो murders हो चुके हैं. Even as we talk, कोई cooling off period भी.
he still tells you he didn't watch his fight because he thought it was going to be BS. And he still, despite Ryan Garcia phoning him and placing that call, he still is picking against Ryan to win. And now you have enter Broner. Broner's interview obviously was recorded and came out after that. And you got Adrian Broner, who just said when Ryan was going through anxiety and dark times, he placed a call. And he says, I'm not going to put him on blast and discuss what we talked about. I read the quote for you. He said, I'm not going to put him on blast and, go over what we went over. But Ryan can call me. I have good relationships with everybody in boxing, yada, yada, yada. And Broner, he says, I got love for you, Ryan. He literally just said that. So it's similar to Chavez Sr. in the way of, I don't think anyone is like angry with Ryan. They're just giving their honest opinion. And
Well, I would agree with that, Mr. Ego. Now, there are certain channels like your own that are going to try and tear down Ryan Garcia because all in all that he's a huge star right now in the sport of boxing. And all in all, if he does beat Gervonta Tank Davis or someone like that, you don't want him to be on a higher level. So we all know what you're going to do with Mr. Ryan. But I do agree with your point that when these fighters are talking about Ryan Garcia and picking Gervonta Tank Davis, they're not really hating on him. They're just stating their opinion. They know that Gervonta Tank Davis is a real special fighter. And if Ryan Garcia is going to beat someone like a Gervonta Tank Davis, because you have to expect the best version of that fighter overall when he's coming into that match, he's going to have to be a little bit better even than the best version of himself than what I've seen.
Honest opinions that I've heard, people are saying that Gervonta Davis is too much. And that's not what you want. And I agree with them, But this is boxing. It's a big fight. So I think he's gonna be in a very precarious position, similar to maybe Fernando Vargas, where he was young and they put him in there with Felix Tito Trinidad.
I would agree. I think that that's a very, very similar situation, and that's why I brought that up earlier.
And then De La Hoya and stuff like that.
And what that's telling you is that Mr. Ego, he knows that Ryan Garcia is not a complete finished product yet either.
And I think that could be the same case for Ryan Garcia. Ryan Garcia, he's going to keep talking and keep talking. The networks are already interested because this is a big fight. And then he's going to talk himself into it. And then he's going to see that Tank is a multiple division champion with...
Well, he's a multiple overall. And a lot of people are not going to like me stating this. Listen, just is what it is. He's multiple weight paper champ. That's what he is. Because it's no offense against Gervonta Tank Davis. And listen, in my view, he's really only been a legitimate champion in one weight class. Because the other belts overall that you have, those are like interim titles and intercontinental. I'm sorry, I don't count those titles. Those are not real titles. It just is what it is. If you do not have one of the 4 official titles, I do not count them.
Different level of skill set. I mean, I just listened to, it was Anthony Peterson, who's
Because
been
nobody cares about the interim or the regular or, the intercontinental title. Those are not real champions.
in the ring and sparred with, he said, Sean Porter, Jared Hurd, Zab Judah, and Gervonta Davis, and he says Ryan ain't winning that. He's like Tank is gorilla-fied and all this stuff. He even said Devin Haney wouldn't win it, and Devin Haney to me is a more skilled guy than Ryan Garcia.
Well, in my view, both Devin Haney and Ryan Garcia, they have their advantages, they have their deficiencies. In my view, if Ryan Garcia is allowed to be cooked all the way, he could potentially be better than Devin Haney, but we may never see that because Ryan Garcia may be put in there with Gervonta Tank Davis to make that mega fight. We'll see what happens.
According to Anthony Peterson, he don't see either guy beating him. He thinks the most high intensity.
And some may say, well, why would you say that about Ryan Garcia? What gives you the idea that maybe he could be more skilled than Devin Haney? I like Devin Haney as a fighter. I think that he's decently quick and has decent feet all in all. And I think all in all that he has somewhat of good movement, but he just gets hit way too much. He's a little bit defensively irresponsible. He's not the worst defensive fighter that I've ever seen, but he gets hit a little bit too often. And I think that once he goes up to 140, we're going to really see how truly good he is. Not saying that maybe he doesn't have a possible chance of unifying there, but it's going to be a lot harder.
Matchup for Tank would be.
And on top of that, Devin Haney does not have a great power. I mean, he was not even able to knock out or even knock down, I believe. What the hell was that dude's name? Venezuelan fighter who fought Lomachenko and Jorge Linares. There we go. Jorge Linares. At least I believe he's from Venezuela. Devin Haney was not even able to knock out a washed-up version of him. And Devin Haney, I'm sorry, he just does not have a great power.
Of course, Stevenson. So, I can see this movie and how it plays out. Ryan Garcia is going to get hyped up and pumped up, and he's going to hear the Broners and the Chavez Sr. saying it, and they're trying to save face and keep the Ryan brand afloat. But it's only going to create more. I promise you, Tank is ready, and it's only going to create more and more pressure.
Well, Tank is ready for Mr. Ryan Garcia, which of course is the conversation that we're talking about. But I really need to see him in other big fights as well. Because there's no offense against Gervonta Tank Davis or Ryan Garcia, but they both talk a little bit too much for what they've really done in their career. And some people, when I talk about Gervonta, they may say, well, what the hell are you talking about? He's an alleged, that's what I'll say, at least an alleged 3-weight division champion. He's a fighter, all in all, that is very highly skilled. He was able to beat Cruz and Barrios and all these other guys. Right, but those guys are not real A-grade fighters. Really, the only debatable A-grade fighter, in my view, that he's ever beaten was Leo Santa Cruz. And I'm not even sure if I would call him an A-grade fighter. So I need to start seeing Gervonta Tank Davis as well as Ryan Garcia in there with true 50-50 tests.
Or Ryan Garcia, because he's going to keep talking and people are going to get tired of talk, and he's going to either have to fight Gervonta Davis to try to prove Chavez Sr. and Boxing Ego and Broner wrong, or he's going to have to fight against another high-level contender or a high-level person, which could be a dangerous fight as well. We'll see how it plays out. SLC, subscribe, like, and comment. Let me know how I did in this video. As always, hate, comment, and subscribe to this video. It is Ego, so I don't know.
But anyways, that's really about it for this video. I just thought that that'd be very particularly interesting. But anyways, that's really about it. If you had to ask me who I believe is going to win the fight, at least if they were to fight this year, I probably would have to go with Mr. Gervonta Tank Davis. Even overall, if it's a year or two from now, I still may go with Gervonta Tank Davis. However, what I will say is this. If Gervonta Tank Davis shows up the same way that he did his last 2 fights, he may not win that fight because Gervonta Tank Davis did not look very good in either of his last 2 fights. However, I will concur that more than likely I expect Mr. Gervonta Tank Davis to show up better than what he did in those 2 fights, because I don't even think Gervonta Tank Davis really took either of those 2 opponents that seriously. But anyway, But that's really about it for today. This is going to be a very interesting fight if or when it does happen. In my view, what is the best move for Mr. Ryan Garcia? I would fight Mr. Teofimo Lopez. Teofimo was a great challenge. Overall, he's a person that doesn't really know his role right now because he only has one loss when it comes down, or he has that one loss to Mr. George Kambosos. So he's still finding his way. So that could still be a great fight. But if Ryan truly has the good, it's a very winnable fight. So if I was Mr. Oscar De La Hoya, I'd be trying to get that fight pronto. But we'll see what happens. Anyways, that's really about it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you all later.